Hi, this is Professor Unmack, and I'm here to present just a short video about federalism. Most of what you need to know about federalism you'll be reading in your textbook, and I also posted another video for you to watch that's kind of cheesy and funny, but has a lot of good information in it for something that's designed to be cheesy and funny. What I want to do is talk a little bit about the way federalism allows states to act as what we call policy laboratories. In other words, to experiment with different ways of solving problems that might work in one state but not work in another state, or that might fit the ideological preferences of one state but not another. So that's what this short video is going to do. I'm not great at these videos, but I do my best. So the first thing I want to do is give you a quick reminder of what federalism is. Federalism refers to the way power is shared between states and the federal government. The U.S. Constitution actually creates the first system of federalism. It's not a unitary system where all of the power is exercised by the national government and the states have limited powers. And it's not a confederation, which is a system of government like under the Articles of Confederation, where the states had all the power and the federal government had very little power. The framers of the Constitution decided to structure the U.S. government so that the national government has specific powers and the states have specific powers, and neither is supreme over the other when they are exercising their own individual power. So the federal government can't tell the states what to do with regard to, for example, how many days of advance voting they have, or whether you can vote by absentee ballot, because most things surrounding elections are decided by the state governments. This is one of the ways the Constitution tries to prevent what Madison calls in Federalist 10 and 51 the mischiefs of faction, and that they were so worried about. Again, today we would call mischiefs of faction tyranny of the majority, and there are a bunch of factors built into the U.S. Constitution that are designed to make it more difficult, not impossible, but more difficult for one faction, whether it's an ideological faction or an economic faction or a religious faction, to take control of all of the levers of power. So what federalism does is it separates out the power so that lots of different groups of power exercise lots of different types of groups exercise lots of different powers, and so it's difficult for one group to take over all the governments. If we were going to have one faction, say the Democratic Party, control all of government, they would have to win elections not only at the national level where we have separated powers, so they'd have to win a majority in the House, they'd have to win a majority in the Senate, they'd have to win the presidency, and then over time they would have to, through the appointment process, control the judiciary. And that would give the Democratic Party complete control over the national government. But we have 50 state governments as well. And that in order to take over all of the government, the Democratic Party would also have to win in all 50 states. They'd have to win the legislative races and the governor's races and the judicial processes as well. So federalism is one of the ways that the Constitution is designed to guard against what Madison calls the mischiefs of faction. Your textbook has a pretty good description of the various federal, state, and what we call concurrent powers. So an example of a federal power that only the federal government can exercise would be immigration policy. States do not get to set their own policies about who's allowed to immigrate to their state or how you could become a citizen, etc. That's all done by the national government. States, on the other hand, have almost complete control over education policy. The federal government gives the states a lot of money, and there are some federal laws having to do with discrimination in the schools and that kind of thing. But for the most part, states decide what their curriculum looks like, how you become a teacher, what the classroom sizes are, what the teacher salaries are, that kind of thing. There are also some powers that we refer to as concurrent powers. So, for example, the power to tax is a concurrent power. The national government can tax, and so can state governments. The national government can build roads, and so can state governments. And those are powers that we call concurrent powers. And there's a lot about this in your book. In general, powers given to the national government specifically in the Constitution, like control over immigration policy, the power to raise an army, the power to go to war, the power to have a currency, those powers cannot be exercised by the states. But the states have a lot of flexibility to exercise power within their states. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of states acting as policy laboratories. There are lots and lots and lots of examples. I'll just give you a couple. One of the things that's been in the news a lot lately is the different policies that states have regarding whether or not people can vote while they are in prison, or if they lose their right to vote while they're in prison, and then what happens to people after they get out of prison. What rights do citizens retain in terms of voting rights after they get out of prison? And this is an issue area where states have almost complete control over what their policies are. And so I'll show you, this website has it's called procon.org. I love it because it has lots of issues that are interesting that they have lots of research on. And this is one of the things they have here is this map that shows the different state voting laws that apply to people while they're incarcerated and after they get out of prison. And you can see that there are wide-ranging policies. So in Maine and Vermont, citizens never lose their right to vote, even while they're incarcerated. And in some states, depending on the crime that's committed, a citizen could lose their right to vote in that state forever. Most states that have a policy that limits voting while in prison restore those rights after the prison sentence and the parole is over. California just changed its law a couple of years ago to allow people who are being incarcerated not in state prisons but in county jails to vote from